Hey there, I'm Annie Dickerson, and on today's episode of the Life and Money Show, we have a very special guest. His name is Bronson Hill. He's the founder of Bronson Equity, and you are going to love his story. We've known Bronson for quite a while now. In fact, he started his business around the time that we got started in real estate as well. So we've been able to grow in parallel paths. And what I love about Bronson's story is that he's never afraid to step outside of his comfort zone. It might have come from his many years in the sales business. As you know, when you're in sales, you're told no probably more often than you're told yes. So something happens in that process. And we talk about that in this show and how the worst that can happen is somebody says no. But if you dissect that, for a lot of people, that's a big crushing blow. If somebody tells you no to something, what is that story that you are then telling yourself about what that no means? So for a lot of people, that can be a hindrance to them even asking in the first place. But in this show, you're going to hear Bronson talk about how he made a very big, a quantum leap, you might even say, from working his W-2 job into reaching astronomical success in the real estate business in just a very short amount of time. In fact, once he stepped outside of his comfort zone and went to ask that key person, that key question, it changed the entire trajectory of his career. And within 3 years, he was able to quit his job and make more money in the real estate business. So now he's been in the real estate industry for quite some time. And in fact, he's expanded into oil and gas and buying businesses as well. I think you're going to love what we talk about as far as not just the tactical, what to do when you want to quit your job and start a business, but really the mindset behind it, the stories we tell ourselves, and the need to live in your truth and your authenticity and the impact that that has on your success, on your trajectory, on the people that you meet, the people who come into your path, and the alignment that you'll ultimately be able to achieve, which will set you up for the success that you're looking for. So much goodness in this conversation. But before we dive in, Bronson's specialty is in exactly what we do also, which is helping people who want to invest in real estate but don't want to be landlords, helping those people to become passive investors through these group investments called real estate syndications. So after listening to this episode, if what Bronson's talking about jives with you, I highly recommend that you follow up with him and learn about his community and see if maybe there's some deals there that you might be interested in investing alongside him in. And what we're talking about, not just in this episode, but in all of our episodes of the Life and Money Show, if you like our style, our community, we've got great opportunities for you to build wealth as well. So to learn more about our opportunities and to join a group of people who are just like you, who are looking to build wealth through investing passively in real estate, we highly recommend that you join our Goodegg Investor Club. It's free to join, open to everybody. And to get more information, just go to goodegginvestments.com/invest. With that, let's dive into our conversation with Bronson Hill. Bronson, welcome to the show. How are you?
Annie, Susan, excited to be here. Love talking about life and money, two of my favorite things.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here. Now, I'm going to dive straight in because I know you had a moment in your history that changed everything for you, changed the trajectory of where you thought you were going in life. You had been working in medical device sales for 10 years. And even though you were still having a little bit of fun doing it, it sounds like you got to a point where you were like, is this the way? Or is there something else out there? And I know that a lot of our listener audience has gotten to that point where they feel stuck, where they're like, I don't know if this is really the path for me. So take us to that moment and share with us what was going on in your life during that time and then what happened next.
Yeah, so I made a decision previously. I think Tony Robbins has this quote, it says, it's in your moments of decision that your destiny is shaped. So I made a decision that I wanted to leave my job. I had a job, I was making over $200K a year in medical device sales, and it was good, but I just didn't like that I didn't have control over my time. A lot of people say I want financial freedom, but it really comes down to time freedom. And to me, I had a few single family houses. It wasn't going as fast as I wanted. So I started getting mentors and learning about multifamily investing. And this event that happened for me, I went to this high ticket event, and somebody who's in the industry that you know as well, we've talked about this person. Basically, I approached them and I knew them not really that well, but I said, hey, how's it going in this area of your business and raising money? And I basically pitched them an idea that I could come on board and help to raise money. And up to that point, I had raised 100,000. After this conversation, we agreed to do it and we agreed to work together. Over the next 18 months, we raised $15 million. And I was basically set up to be able to leave my job within those 3 years that I'd planned. So it's amazing how you set the intention, the goal, you make the decision. And then as your mind will sometimes, something happens, it's like, oh, I'm going to do this. And it can just show up in your life, which is amazing.
Okay, hold on. You had raised 100,000 on your own before. So you kind of had proven the model.
Well, it shows up in your life when you decide to make a step.
Exactly. I have a saying, life has an action bias. So you can have great plans and great ideas, but when you actually move forward and you actually start taking action, it actually can change. So yeah, what you were saying too, Annie, is it's correct. Basically that this was a very significant moment in my life because it just wasn't happening for me as quickly as I'd like. It really wasn't happening very fast. And so to me, I just kept trying. Again, another Tony Robbins quote is, you keep the end goal in mind and you just continually change your approach. So it's like, well, route A didn't work. Route B was okay. C was, but D, oh, this was it. And then you just double down on it. That's really what happened. So that was really one of those experiments that I have. I'm going to go for it. And the worst that could happen is if somebody says, no, I don't want to work with you.
But even that is so terrifying for so many people. I've been to events before, especially outside of my zone of expertise, let's say. If I were to go to a real estate conference right now, I'd be pretty confident talking to people. But if I went to like some conference in, let's say, medical device sales, I would have no idea what they were talking about. So how did you have the confidence to go up to one of the leaders or the leader of this event and just pitch them your idea?
One thing I've learned is that at the end of the day, a lot of times, if you want to get ahead, you have to be willing to ask. And I think having a sales background is you just get used to being rejected. And public speaking and rejection, I think spiders are up there too, are things people hate. They don't want to be put on the spot. But I've realized that if I'm willing to ask, the worst that could happen is someone could say no, and that's okay. So I've just learned that over time, if I can just keep asking, it's not just in asking people to do stuff for you or with you as partners, but it's trying out or learning something. So I call it like a low risk experiment. A high risk experiment is like you lose all your money or you die or something like that. It's like if something doesn't go the way you want it, something terrible happens. That's a high risk experiment. A low risk experiment is maybe I'm out a little bit of money, a little bit of time. Maybe I got my ego's hurt a little bit, but if it works, it could be incredible. And I've just been amazed at, as I've asked, doors have opened. I asked Ken McElroy to be on a couple events and he decided to join. My book behind me here, he did the forward to it. And just things like that, where it's like, well, how did this happen? Well, I just asked. And so if you're willing to ask and if you're bold in your asking, the worst that can happen typically, somebody can just say no.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. I think so many people get caught in this. Well, if I ask and they say no, even though I won't have lost anything, basically I will ruminate on this story of why they said no and what that means about me. And I think that's where people get stuck. That's where the risk for a lot of people is huge. It sounds like you got to a point, maybe through 10 years of sales experience, to where a no is a no. It doesn't mean anything about me. It could mean something completely unrelated to me. Then the asking is not as high of a risk as for somebody who may rarely ask.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point. It's really about the story we tell ourselves about something that happens. This was really hard for me as well. So after I had that conversation, after we raised the 15 million, I was still scared to leave my job because all of my family, they're all teachers. They all do stable jobs. They're all like, no, you're crazy. Why would you leave your 200K, your job? You're doing it like 30 hours a week. No, never do it. And I realized like it was so tough. And then I got a room full of entrepreneurs. They helped to kind of reality check it for me. Like, well, all 5 or 6 of them were like, hey, we've heard your story. We've heard what you're doing. You should pretty much leave your job as soon as possible. And if it doesn't work out, you could always go back to medical sales. And I was kind of like, huh, okay. But it's funny how we attach so much to like, if this succeeds or fails, I'm a success or I'm a failure. And it really goes back to that book. A great book on this topic is called Mindset by Carol Dweck. It says, people that have a growth mindset look at everything as learning. There's no such thing as failure unless you choose to mean that you're a failure. If I look at it like this is just information, oh, this didn't work. Well, I'm going to learn from this. Then it's an opportunity for growth. The people that have a fixed mindset, and we all can fall into this. This thing happened and it failed. So therefore I'm a failure. I could talk a lot about my failure, all the things I've done that I've failed in. But the more I'm willing to put myself in, be in a place where I could fail, the more success I find I achieve.
Such a great point. I want to pull this piece out is that you went to the people that you knew. These are mostly people who were likely working a W-2 job. They looked at that realm of possibility and they said, well, what are you talking about? You are at the top of what's possible within the W-2 realm. Why would you leave this throne that you're sitting on? Versus these entrepreneurs, which were in a completely different sphere. And they said, whoa, sounds like you're on a different path here. You need to leave as soon as possible because you got a lot of potential here. And I think that's such a valuable thing. That's exactly what happened to me too. In the worlds that I knew before, it was like, why would you leave? You've got this perfect thing on paper. You've got everything. But inside, I knew that something wasn't jiving with who I wanted to be. It sounds like once you talk to those entrepreneurs, it's almost like they gave you that permission that you didn't even know you needed to take that step. And that changed everything for you.
Yeah, it goes back again, a lot of this stuff. It's amazing the link between personal development as well as business growth or just growth in different areas of your life. So it's almost always I've had to break through my personal development, at least to some huge 10x net worth kind of thing. Not always, but it can really lead to that. So there's a quote by Jim Rohn, motivational speaker who's no longer alive, but he said, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Robert Kiyosaki said this one time, I heard him live and he got really emphatic. He said, stop listening to poor people. It's like you're trying to learn about finance, but like a lot of people you're listening to, they don't have any money. And if you want to be wealthy, you've got to listen to wealthy people. If you want to be in great shape physically, you've got to get around people that are really healthy and doing these healthy habits. So it's like that. If I want to be an entrepreneur, if I'm interested in that, I can't listen to the people that have been stuck in a job and that maybe are not wired to be entrepreneurs. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just I can't listen to those people when it comes to that advice. So I just think who you take in and whose opinion of you matters. It's really important who you're listening to.
So then you pitched this guy and he said yes. And then you partnered and you were working your full-time job and you were able to raise $15 million together. So walk us through that because that is mind-blowing that you were able to do both at the same time.
Sometimes if you're just kind of bold or fearless, or I guess sometimes I'm a little bit more like, oh yeah, let's start it, let's do it. Let's agree to it and then figure it out. So that was one of those like, I'm going to agree to it and then figure it out moments. So I agree to do this. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, when am I going to have time to do this? I'm working full time. So I'm like, literally just anytime I could. What my role really involved is using this person's platform, helping to create some content, but it was mostly taking calls. So I took typically 15 to 25 calls a week. And these were 30-minute calls with investors. I do them at 6 a.m. before I started working. I would do them at lunch. I had a medical sales. I drive around a lot. So I'd schedule when I was going to be driving and I'd open up some times there and people would fill into those. I'd do them in the evenings. Once in a while, if I came back from vacation, I have to take a whole Tuesday off and do 20 calls in a row. I mean, just hustle and do whatever it took. And there's a full-time job. I was able to do it probably in about 30 hours a week, but this other stuff added a lot. So, I mean, there was a season of a good year and a half or a couple of years, I was putting in 60 plus hours a week. So there's a lot of time I was doing between these two things, maybe 60, 70 hours. But I realized I was a hustle for a while, but then I could really get to what I wanted. And I think for a lot of people that feel stuck is there is time. It's just you have to cut other things out and prioritize what you want to do. So sometimes hustling for the short term can really set you up for the long term.
So how old was your daughter around this point?
She was 6 then.
Okay. So you suddenly went from working 30 hours a week to doubling that workload. Talk to us a little bit about the impact on the family and how did that all play out and how did that feel?
Yeah. So I'm a single dad. So I have my daughter half the time. I would just figure, I'd have her 5 days one week and 2 days the next. And I just kind of hustle on the days I didn't have her. And I didn't really have a lot of social life. I didn't have a lot of other stuff going on. I was just kind of really focused on it. And then not a lot of TV. I'd go to bed early. So I just try to schedule things. She would go to school and she had her after school program. And then when I'd put her to bed at 7 or 7:30, whatever, then I would just work for a couple more hours. I mean, just kind of do what I had to at the time. And even then I'd still try to out on the weekend, take a day off. I'm kind of like hustle 6-day kind of guy and then take a day off and stuff to be able to relax and create memories. It was definitely a lot. And there were times where there was some travel, there were different events, going to a lot of events and as well as Julie as well. I think just being willing to do what other people are not willing to do. It's hard for a lot of people. A lot of people would say, hey, I can't do it because I have a job or I have kids or I have other things. And it's like, well, can you do it for a season? If you're married, can you get your spouse on board? Say, hey, for the next 2 years. I know a guy that actually was studying for the financial test called the CFA, the Chartered Financial Analyst Test. And he would literally like stay up all night, 3 days a week and take some medicine. It didn't seem like the healthiest thing, but he found a way to do it. For like a year or two, he did it and he got done and he moved on to his next thing. So sometimes a sacrifice for the short run can make sense in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that that's something that you learned growing up? How did you come to that? Because a lot of people, they think they're just like, I can't do that. And they just hit a wall. But how did you get to a point where you had it or embodied that mindset?
I think there's people in life that feel very entitled. They feel like a victim when they don't get everything handed to them, that I should have everything. And there's reasons for that. Sometimes it's an internal way that we view the world. Sometimes it's the way we're treated or maybe we're spoiled as a child. I don't know. I've noticed this. So other people, for me, like I grew up, there were 4 kids in my family. We didn't really have a lot. So it's kind of like I realized, I saw my older brother, he did paper routes, like delivering newspapers when he was 14, 15, and he bought a car when he was 16. He saved up $4,000, bought his own car. And so I saw him do that. So I realized, like, even from an early teenager, like, hey, if I work hard, I can benefit from my own actions. And if I go do that, it actually benefits me. So I realized that hard work, like not just working hard, but working smart. So I feel like this was something that if I could do this, and that literally, I think after the first year or two, I was making more doing real estate at the time than I was making in my medical sales job. So I found a way to scale it. But then it was like, what do I do with this? So I think that it comes back to just being willing to do what other people don't do. And even if that were to fail, or even if things at times we've had some deals really struggle. Like, I know it's been a lot tough the last couple of years. We had some real estate deals that if we were to go back, we probably wouldn't have done those deals. So there's learning there. But again, I don't look at it like I'm a failure or this hasn't worked. I look at it and say, well, there's a lesson here and I'm learning. So even if I did a whole bunch of work, a deal struggles or something doesn't work out the way that I want or something or an investment, like it doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It means that I'm learning and I'm growing. So regardless, another example of this is we're buying an e-commerce business right now. It's a $25 million e-commerce business. It's going to be an incredible cash flowing deal. It's going to about probably 4 or 5x the revenue or profit in our business almost overnight. What it comes from is we're going to learn a ton by doing this. So even if it doesn't turn out exactly how we want, we feel pretty confident with it. And we're going to learn if this is going to be a rinse and repeat thing we can do in other things. So I'm willing to put myself in situations where I don't know what I'm doing so that I can learn. And I think the learning is the most valuable thing.
Yeah, I think it comes back to what you were talking about earlier around the story around the no and the story around maybe things not going exactly according to how you thought they would go. But it doesn't matter because then the story you tell yourself is not, I'm a failure. I should never try this again. This doesn't work for me. But the story you then tell yourself or you choose to tell yourself is, I'm learning. I'm just at the beginning. I can't expect myself to be a natural on my first go. I'm learning things along the way that'll make me better the second time around. And those are all conscious choices that we're all making all the time. And if you get stuck in the path of, I can't do it, I've hit a wall, that's it for me, then you'll never get past that. And those hurdles are put in the way for us for a reason, because in order to get to this goal that you want to get to, you have to become a certain type of person. You have to grow outside of the shell of who you are right now. And it's a painful process sometimes, but you have to be willing to step beyond your comfort zone and take those risks to get to that point. And it sounds like you've done that not just one time, but many, many times, expanding into real estate and now buying businesses as well. It all takes learning and growth.
Yeah, no, it's 100% true. Yeah, I've been really fortunate to interview over 2,500 millionaires through these calls. I've had investor calls and asking them values-based questions, net worth, and just their habits and things like that. And so one thing I've realized, I had this conversation with an Uber driver when I was in Dallas this summer a while ago talking, and they kind of asked, they overheard a call, I was talking with an investor and raising $100,000 or something. And it's not a normal call you probably hear in an Uber. I know you've had some calls like this too. You realize I get off the call and they're like, hey, I want to ask you, like, how do I learn about money or how do I learn about this stuff? I'm actually writing my second book. So it's called Rich Brain, How the Wealthy Change Their Brain to Change Their Bank Account. Basically, one of the principles from Rich Brain is the idea of wealth worthiness. Do I feel like I'm worthy of it? And there's this story that we tell ourselves. There's kind of been a theme on this episode here is just what's the story I'm telling myself? Because a lot of times, if you're like me, and like most of us, we've had a very negative bias. We've said, oh, I don't look as good as so-and-so. I'm not as good at public speaking over here. I'm whatever. And we tell ourselves these things that aren't true. They helped us kind of get through childhood. But what happens is we have to change those tapes. There's different ways to do it, but I think that one of the best ways to do it is to literally tell yourself a different story, to create the things in your life that you want to create. And for me, I went through a divorce 8 years ago, felt no sense of personal confidence. Like, well, who am I? What am I doing? So what I did is I went back to, okay, well, what do I want? What do I know to be true based on my faith or what I want to create in my life? And I started creating things around confidence and showing up and owning the room and being a presence and being there. And it didn't happen right away, but over time, after a period of 6 to 12 months, I would show up that way. I would show up as someone who's a powerful person, who owns the room, who has the confidence and authority of a king. Because these are all things now that I've said and I've reprogrammed myself every single day. So I call these wealth whisperings or worthiness whisperings. It's the things that you say to yourself. You can change those things. And that's when you go into a room now, instead of feeling lack of confidence, whatever, you can actually well up with confidence and generate it from the inside. So when you can tell when you talk to someone and they just have that confidence coming from the inside versus somebody who's kind of like, not really sure, whatever, like, how are you going to convince somebody else to want to work with you or whatever, if you're not sure if you want to work with yourself, you're not sure where it's coming from. So anyway, I think that's a real valuable thing that I learned along this path.
I like how you put it, that you've got to change the tapes. For those of us who remember changing tapes. But yeah, it's great to think of it in that visual term, because you think about things that come up in your mind. You're like, well, that's just the way my mind works. But then if you really take yourself out of it and you say, no, that's just a story I'm telling myself. That's just a tape that I'm running subconsciously. And you say, you know what? I choose to change that tape. I'm going to eject that tape right now. I'm going to put a new tape in and choose to tell yourself about the confidence, about being a king, about being a master and owning the room. Recently, I was at this retreat. Sometimes you just get those downloads or those insights. And I had this moment, we were all dancing around the room, and all my life, I've been dancing, thinking about, what do other people think about my dance moves right now? Should I do this? I should copy that other person. They're doing this. That looks pretty cool. And in that moment, I felt my body and I was like, this just feels good. I'm just going to do what feels good. Why don't I just dance in a way that feels good for me? And who cares what other people think? And in that moment, I was instantly able to change that tape that was running 40 years of my life. So it can be those small moments. It can be moments that take years to change the tape if it's something that's very deeply embedded within you. But I love how mindset has been such a huge part of your journey. And when you make that your priority, there's no limit to how far you can grow. So you started with 100K. Then over the next 18 months, you and your partner together raised 15 million. Then where did you go from there?
Yeah, so we kept doing multifamily deals. I actually kind of launched my own company, Bronson Equity. And so we found some other partners to do different assets. My book, Fire Yourself, talks about replacing your working income with passive income in 3 years or less. So how do people actually do that? So after all these calls of people that have a net worth of 2 million, I have a financial advisor. I've only done stuff that they recommend. I've never done real estate. I know I should, but I don't know how. I don't know what to do. How do I vet it? And then I started looking at other alternative assets. Real estate is great for, at least multifamily real estate is great for appreciation, sometimes some cash flow and some tax benefits, but there's other assets that have incredible tax benefits or they've got incredible cash flow aspects. So I started learning more about that, started investing personally, also started bringing funds to those. So now we've raised about 45 million. We've done some private businesses, done several oil and gas, some VC things, some development. And again, my unashamed goal is to own everything and operate nothing.
Aha, I love it.
So that's my goal, is to fire myself to continue to grow. And as I'm scaling and growing, investors can come alongside and grow and invest alongside me as well.
So you said something that made my ears perk up on behalf of the listener. You said how anybody can quit their job in 3 years or less, just like you did. So I'm sure the listener's like, wait, what did he just say? He said I could quit my job in the next 3 years. So walk us through that. Maybe some of the principles from your book. If somebody's listening to this right now and they're like, I feel really stuck in my job. I would love to quit in 3 years, but where do I even start?
Yeah, so I believe it's possible for just about anyone in 3 years. There's really two paths. One, I had a good job. I didn't really have a lot of savings at the time. So I became more active. I figured out how I could help other people with their money problem of they don't have money, but they had money and they didn't know how to invest it. So I could be somebody who could help bring deals, find money, kind of help add value that way. So that's one way, is being more active. People do it all kinds of ways actively. But the way I think the book is primarily talking about is as a passive investor, where most people need to start is not, hey, I just need a lot of money. I don't know kind of what this is. You have to figure out really what your living expenses are currently and what you need to cover that. And maybe you're living really lavishly, like, hey, I could actually survive. I could pay my bills. I could travel a little bit. I could pay for insurance and all the things I need to do. And for me, it wasn't that much. Even though I live in LA, it was only 5 or 6K a month. It was not a lot of money. I don't have a really fancy lifestyle, so travel a fair amount, but I didn't really need a lot that was very fancy. So even though I was making 200K for 70K a year, I could live off of. So that was a much more manageable number, the rat race number there. So for somebody who's passive, if they were able to save, in my situation, let's say you could save 100K a year and you're able to generate a 15% average annual return over 3 years. Now, that's a pretty good return. There are certain deals that do that. You can't always guarantee that, especially sometimes deals they sell on the back end. But let's just say you could get 15% per year and you could reinvest that. Well, within 3 years, you'd be able to just about cover 65, 70K a year of passive income from just those 3 years from 100K. Now, if you extend it out to 5 years, you're getting the 15%, then you're generating 120K per year. So this is stuff that people can do. And I talk to a lot of people that are high earners that are making hundreds of thousands or even over $1 million a year. And they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how it works. Well, you have to invest in yourself. You have to learn. You've got to look at the webinars. You've got to have the calls with investment groups like yours or ours, and just try to figure out what could work, figure out what are your goals and what do you actually need. And as you start that process, you will learn a lot. And I think if people have $1 million to invest, don't put it in one deal, do a little research and maybe put 50K in a few different deals just to start and to see how it goes, and then learn. And you're going to learn a ton.
And I think the key to what you said, it's almost like going back to when you went to that event. It's in the moments of decision. You decided you were going to pitch this guy, and that led to a whole different trajectory. So if somebody's listening and they're not sure, they're like, I don't know, I don't really love my job. It doesn't feel right, but it's the best I got. And I feel kind of stuck. But it's in that moment of decision. If you decide right now and you say, I'm going to make this work one way or another, I'm going to decide right now, I'm going to quit my job in 3 years. I don't know how it's going to happen. But clearly, there's at least one or two paths that you just talked about that almost anybody could do. And I guarantee there's more than just those couple of paths. So it's about making that decision. And then from there, figuring out the how piece. But you've got to make the decision first.
So there's a great book out. Now, I've read it twice now. It's called 10X is Easier Than 2X. Have you read this book?
I've heard of it. I don't think I've read that one.
So it's very interesting because it says, if you ask people, is it easier to double the size of your business or to double your sales or double something, or is it easier to 10X? And almost everybody would say it's easier to 2X. But he says, no, it's actually substantially harder to 2X. Because if you go back to when I was in medical sales and working my business now, if I'm going to 2X what I'm doing, twice the revenue, twice the income, twice the sales, whatever. Well, in my own mind, it's like I have to work twice as much. If I'm working 40 hours, now I've got to work 80 hours. I've got to do the same thing I'm doing, just twice as much. But if you were to think in terms of 10X, you'd have to let go of about 80% of what you're currently doing. You'd actually become a different person. So this is a big visualization step of, if I'm 10X from where I'm at right now, what does that actually look like? What should I stop doing? What are the things I can't do? And there may, like you said, only be one or two or three ways to actually get there. This actually happened to me recently with this private equity e-commerce deal that, again, when we get this done, it's going to be about a 5X almost overnight of where we're currently at. And it came from me seeing myself as this 10X person. And what is this person? And what am I actually doing? And continue to spend time with that person. And then I realized, like, when this thing came around, it was like, oh, well, this is it. So it's fun how to see how those things can happen. And this is how people take big jumps, is because they're able to let go of a lot of these things that they were doing and looking at the results and saying, this is not actually getting where I want to go. And if I'm thinking in terms of 10X, it's a whole different thinking.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. You're so right. Because if you're just aiming to 2X, you're just going to double down and do everything more and harder. And you're like, oh, that's exhausting. I can't, I'm already doing enough as I am. I don't have any more time. But then to think about 10X, it's so far beyond the realm of what you think is possible. It's almost ludicrous for a moment. You're like, how could I possibly 10X what I'm doing right now? But then you start to think, wait, I'd have to do it in a completely different way. I'd have to come up with systems and structures, and I'd have to be a different person than I am right now. And suddenly it becomes fun, a little playful, a little creative to think outside the box of where you are now. So I love that.
When you guys have done this, you guys, your business has exploded the last 4 or 5 years. I've watched you guys, and you've hired people. It's the who, not how principle, right? When you have a problem, instead of saying, how can I solve this? Oh my gosh, it's saying, well, who can solve this for me? That's exactly what you've done. And I'm sure you guys are continually pushing yourself to think bigger too, which is amazing.
Yeah. So now you're on this trajectory. You're buying real estate, you're investing in oil and gas, you're investing in businesses. What's your vision? What are you hoping to achieve? And what's the future look like for you now?
Yeah, so we have a couple things we're really focused on. For investors, we want to continue to do great deals that make a lot of sense. We're doing a lot of stuff. We're coming back into multifamily. We think it's a great time because of seeing great markets. Things are discounted sometimes 20, 30, 40% in great markets from where they were several years ago, which is unusual and awesome. And then the three things are cash flow, appreciation, and tax benefits. So those are the things we're looking for investors. So as we do this e-commerce deal, it's a very high cash flow. If that works out the way we think it could over time, we may do more of those and just kind of double down in that. Also, I have a mastermind for high net worth individuals that's just for passive investors that are trying to get around. I've realized that for people that are passive and want to be fully passive, the most transformational relationship is another passive investor. Everyone else in finance wants to sell them something, including you and I. We have good in nature, we're good intention. I know you are, and we want everybody to do our deals, but another passive investor is invested for 5, 10, 20 years. They're going to give completely unbiased stuff. They just want to share information. And so we've created a group around that, which has been awesome. So I'm excited to do more with that. And just again, continue to try to add more value, have more fun, travel more. I've got Portugal coming up in a couple of weeks, and that'll be my 6th international trip of the year. So I work hard and I do play hard. So it's fun.
Yeah. I'm curious, how do you choose where you're going to go? A busy schedule like you've got, how do you, as you look forward to this next year, at the end of the year, are you already planning the trips for the next year? Do you calendar those? How do you decide where you're going to go, who you're going to go with?
So there's Dan Sullivan who wrote this 10X book, 10X Season 2X. He talks about the entrepreneurial time system where you have 3 types of days. You have your focus days, which are like doing interviews or pitching deals or talking to investors. There's more buffer days, which are more planning and kind of prep stuff. And then there's free days. And a free day is where I'm not in my emails, I'm not answering investor calls, I'm not doing those things. So once a quarter, I go away for 2 nights and I just do planning. I have one coming up. I was actually just away last week, did one. I do another one at the end of this year, but I'm going to get away. And I have a printed big, large calendar. And I went through for this year. I plan to take 150 free days this year. I didn't get to 150 free days. I got to, I think maybe 140. So I was close. But again, I just go through and I plan. I'll plan on different chunks of like, okay, here's a time I could take a trip here. Here's a time I could take a trip here. How I choose where I go, I get these notifiers where when it's like, oh my gosh, how could I not go when it's that cheap? And so I've gotten some great deals. I was in Ireland in August. You went for $380, used points for most of that trip as well. Portugal, similar. So if you have flexibility of time and you can shift things around, obviously with family, it's a little more, you got to figure things like that with children. But no, I just really enjoy being able to explore. I think it's been 43 countries so far and just love being able to live out the value of learning while traveling.
So that's 150 days of the year that are free days that you're like out, like you're not working during those days. Is that right?
Yeah. So this is a helpful tool. If you just look at weekends, if you don't work on the weekends, which is a lot for some people, a lot of people say, oh my gosh. But if you really think about it, there's very little things that could actually fall apart. Now, maybe something could fall apart, but maybe you have somebody in your team, especially your team gets bigger, that can help you cover on the weekends. So just the weekends is 104 days. And then if you add in holidays, it adds another 11 or 13. So you're up to like 115, 118 days. So it's actually not that many days. And then you take a couple weeks on top of that, then it's more days. But again, I think a lot of creativity comes when you're outside of the office. There's some studies that show like 92 or 94% of great ideas come when you're not sitting at a desk in an office. So when I'm out running, when I'm out walking, when I'm traveling, it just brings a novelty and adventure. And then you come back and you have just awesome energy when you come back. And so to me, exercise and travel have led to so many creative ideas that have really generated a lot of value in my business. So it's just how I've realized how I function. And then when you travel, I think you just learn so much. And a lot of people have this idea, oh yeah, I'd love to do that bucket list trip. Well, I do them every quarter. I try to do every quarter. Every year. My big one this year was Nepal and India. I went for 18 days and I did a 11-day hike to the base camp of Mount Everest. So I didn't climb Everest, I went to the base camp and it was amazing. And not everybody's in a situation where they can do that, but there's things you can do. And what would you do with that free time? What would you create if you weren't thinking about work? And it's actually a lot of times a lot more than just allowing everything to fill in all the time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's all about that intentionality. Having any goal is better than having no goal, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're like, okay, there's 104 weekend days in the year. Let me just take those to start. And let me just plan not to work on the weekend days. Great. That's your goal for right now. Or if you want to 10x it, you say 200 free days. Okay, how can I think way outside the box to get there? Similarly, a few years ago, I remember my husband and I made a goal to spend 3 weeks of the year away from home. So in hotels or home exchanges or traveling with the family. We made it to 3 weeks. And at the time, it was a big leap for us because we had only taken like little weekend trips here and there prior to that. But 3 weeks was a big deal for us. Now, as I think over this year, I spent well over 3 weeks just in solo retreats on my own. Like I was in Scotland for 2 weeks. I just came back from Tulum on a retreat in Mexico earlier this year at San Miguel de Allende. And so it's just about that intentionality and really setting the stage and incrementally increasing those goals. And then it doesn't seem so hard. So I love that.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. There's a rule called Parkinson's Law, and it says that tasks fill the time allotted to them. If you have an assignment that you're like, oh, it's going to take me all day, or you have all day, it's going to take you all day. But if you give yourself limits, you can fit it in an hour. So I'll do things like even during the day, like I got this amount of time, I'm going to get this. And it's amazing how productive you can be when you structure your time and you give yourself limits. And then also with delegation, if you get good team members, my unique ability are three things. It's strategy, it's networking, and it's creating. And if I can do those things, I'm a happy camper and I get paid to do it. I love it. But everything else, even some of those things I can give away. If I can have other people do all these things, then people look at me like, oh my gosh, you're everywhere. You're doing everything. You're trying. Like, secretly, I'm really not doing everything. I'm focused when I'm here, but I'm kind of just not really doing everything.
It's about working smart.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, you're a wealth of knowledge and mindset and great frameworks. I'm so glad we covered so much in this conversation. But with that, Bronson, we're going to move into the Life and Money Show Spotlight round. This is the 3 questions that we ask all our guests. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Fantastic. First question is about your life and money. So share with us one thing that you're doing to live a meaningful and intentional life by design.
You know, my big why, a few years ago, I discovered really what my big why is. And I was at this event with a speaker named Christine Kane, who works in human trafficking. And she basically shared the story of this gal who was rescued in Greece. It was from North Africa. You know, most people that are in human trafficking, they never get rescued, like 99%. It's a very messy, it's very difficult. Some people become victims. They go to become a victimizer. It's just a really challenging thing. So when she was rescued, 14, 15 years old, and of course I have a daughter, so this hit me really hard. She just with tears in her eyes said to Christine, when she'd been rescued, she said, well, why didn't you come sooner? And something in me just broke and said, this is my why. This is what it's all for. It's for giving for this cause. And so I haven't figured out fully how I'm going to do it. I've served on a board in this for a while. I'd love to be more involved, and I've been on some trips and things, but it's just the more you learn about it, 20 to 40 million human slaves. That's my big why. So that's what I think it's all for, is just really trying to help with that cause.
Yeah, it's freedom on another level. Here we are talking about financial freedom, and then freedom on a soul level, on a human level, is a right that everybody deserves. And to be part of that movement, even a small part, is so meaningful.
Totally, 100%.
All right. Second question is around others' life and money. So share with us a life or money hack. And by hack, we mean loosely a tip, a tool, a resource, a book, anything that we haven't covered maybe that you think has really helped you on your journey that you think might help someone else as well.
I was just talking from my new book called Rich Brain, and it just kind of really brings me back to the work of Napoleon Hill. We have the same last name, but he's not my cousin, but that would be an amazing story. We're so distracted. We spend, I think, 3 hours on average a day watching TV and 2 hours on social media, other sorts of media related videos or things like that. So 5 hours a day is on the average adult. This sounds like a lot, but when you really think about how much time we have, it's not a lot. But Napoleon Hill said we should spend 30 minutes a day imagining the person we wish to become. And I've actually done this. I did this at a conference once where it didn't even take 30 minutes, but it's just where you take time and you close your eyes and you think about, okay, who's this person look like 5 years from now? What are they doing? What's their body language? What's their emotion? Whatever. And you actually, when you had your eyes closed and you just stepped forward like into who that person was, and you felt that in your body, what that felt like. So all this stuff with personal development, I think visualizing, saying, feeling in your body, just getting those things going, I think that's really what creates the change. Because then what happens is you actually show up as that person. So you show up a certain way, the universe, the world, got everything just kind of like, oh, this is who this person is. This is how Elon Musk, this is how all these achievers do these amazing things. How in the world is this person, like they're going to Mars? Well, they showed up as that person, like things that are impossible because they just simply created it and they lived out of that. And that's when you live out a possibility, nothing's impossible. So on the personal development theme, I think just really visualizing the person you wish to become.
I love that. That's a great one. I think it was Beyonce who started out, she had created that persona, Sasha Fierce, and then she became Beyonce. So that's a really, really good one. It's almost along the lines of fake it till you make it, but create this persona of who you want to become. And then you're going to consciously and subconsciously start to step in to that identity.
There's an amazing book called The Alter Ego Effect. And I just read it, if you read this book, but it talks about Beyonce Knowles, it talks about Bo Jackson, it talks about all these, even Superman, like all these people had these alter egos and they were able to basically become that person for that situation. Winston Churchill, all these people. So the book is incredible because it just talks about like, who do you want to show up as? And you can basically become that person as you show up. It's really amazing.
Oh, that's a good one. Alter Ego. That's the name of the book?
The Alter Ego Effect.
The Alter Ego Effect. Okay.
Todd Herman. Yeah, great book.
Awesome. I'll add that to my list. All right. Final question. And you've touched on this a little bit, but if you have something else, how are you helping to make the world a better place, however you choose to interpret that question?
Well, I talked about the big picture of the big why, but I think at the end of our lives, we're going to die. And we don't really remember people 100 years ago, like very few people. There's a few people that do. And of course, that'd be great to be somebody that you're remembered for. But I think everything we do, even the smallest intention, has just this incredible impact, both in this life and I think also in eternity, just that we get to impact people with an intention, a thought. It's our family, it's our kids, it's our neighbors, it's the person that we see on the road that they have road rage against us or whatever the things, like we can just think about how we're impacting the world. And these all send out signals and energy and vibrations into the world of how are we actually impacting others. So I think at the end of the day, when we die, would somebody say, if there were more people like Annie or more people like Bronson or more people like you, would the world be a better place? And if the answer is yes, then I think that's a pretty great life.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you chose that because that's been something I've been grappling with a lot lately. Because I think as a young person, I was like, I want to make this big thing. I want to impact the world. I want to make a name for myself. I've done a lot of that. And now I'm like, but I just want to make somebody smile.
Yeah.
Whoever I meet in the day, if I can make their day a little bit better and never make a name for myself, that's really all that life is about, is just making those small impacts on people and helping to raise the collective consciousness that way. And then it ripples out and it impacts everybody. I used to think that it was, I have to change the world. I have to go out and it's everybody else who needs to be changed. And now that I'm older and wiser, I'm like, no, it's actually, if I just change myself and I just take accountability for who I am and I live in my authenticity and my power and my truth, then that's the best way that I can impact the world. And so I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's funny, I talk about money, but money gives you freedom to do what you're here to do. And I think it is a huge benefit if you're financially free. But if you are free and you had the freedom of time, what would you do? What would you create?
Yeah. Well, Bronson, I know that people are going to want to follow up with you and learn more. So tell them if they did want to connect with you, where can they go?
So I have a free gift for your audience. It's something that I put together. People are talking about that inflation is down. We found it's actually 50% higher as far as food prices than it was 4 years ago. And I think that if something with certainty, the government will continue to create more currency and cause more inflation. But there's a way that you can actually use this to your advantage. So I created a free guide called How to Use Inflation to Your Advantage, using real estate, using debt, using precious metals, some really unique strategies that a lot of people haven't found. So if you text the word inflation to 33777, you can get that free guide. So that's the word inflation to 33777.
Fantastic. Bronson Hill, founder of Bronson Equity. Thank you so much for being here with us and our listeners today.
Thanks, Danny. Appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.